Jimping, jimping, jimping. Little cutouts located on either the spine of the blade or somewhere on the spine of the handle. Sometimes you get them in places like the backspacer, the rear or the butt of the handle. The cutouts and patterns, how fine they are, how wide they are, how shallow they are. It varies from manufacturer to manufacturer, from knife to knife, but the purpose remains the same. They're designed to give you extra control on the knife, whether it be on the handle or the blade itself, so you don't slip as easily. So the knife does not fly out of your hands as easily, particularly in perhaps a stressful situation. I believe jimping is somewhat of a fad. Back in the day, around 10 years ago or so, I felt people were going nuts over it. They really wanted good jimping on their blades. They would like everything about a knife, but if they knew it did not have very good jimping, or at least if they thought it did not have very good jimping, they'd be like, not for me, and they wouldn't even touch it. Personally, I'd rather have jimping than no jimping at all, even if the jimping is not very good, but it's not a deal breaker for me. It's a plus having it, but I don't really care that much if I do not have it. Yeah, it's nice and handy. I like having that extra little bit of control. It's kind of just a why not thing, why not just Dremel in some lines right there on the blade or anywhere on the spine, make it functional. I'd rather have it than not have it, but again, not a deal breaker. But I'm going to show you a handful of knives just to showcase the varying patterns and styles of jimping that exist out there. Some are more functional than others. The one you're looking at right here on the CJRB, model is AR RPM 9. This one has pretty good jimping. Functional enough, I can lock my thumb in there a little bit. It slips a little if I really try to get it moving, but it's certainly less slippery, noticeably less slippery than not having the jimping on the spine of the blade at all. It's in an okay spot, especially if I choke up on it. It uses more of the lower portion of my thumb. But if I'm down here behind the flipper, then I can use the tip of my thumb a little more. Speaking of the flipper, that actually is jimped right there too, which helps a little bit for opening it up. Then we do have some jimping on the backspacer. Very beautiful. I think it looks really cool. But is that really useful? Not really. I mean, the only thing that'll ever make contact with it would probably be the fat of my hand right down here, but it doesn't really do anything. It's more just aesthetic milling. It looks really cool though, but it doesn't have much of a function down there. One thing I will say is this jimping's kind of rounded. If you look very closely, you can see kind of like rounded little hills they look like. Now this certainly makes the jimping and the knife overall more comfortable, but it doesn't help for the sake of jimping locking your thumb in. A lot of manufacturers will also do that. They don't want the jimping to be too sharp. Maybe some people don't like that. Maybe it's just too aggressive for some people. Maybe people accidentally slide across that with the back of their hand when they reach to go in for something else in their pocket somehow. But for whatever reason, this company decided to make it functional enough, but it is kind of shallow and it's kind of rounded. So I'd give this C+, B- on a good day. It's okay, but my thumb kind of slips over it a little bit. But the plus side is it's not uncomfortable if that matters to you in the context of jimping. Let's move on to a knife that does not have any jimping whatsoever, the CRKT Fossil. No jimping on there. I shouldn't say whatsoever. There is on the backspacer as well, which I suppose can help if you're holding this in a reverse grip. Sure, yeah, I'd rather have it than not have it. I'd be more concerned with the jimping up here, and there is none. However, I don't really care that much. I don't miss it a whole lot because this knife is so damn big. Very big, long knife, and because of these G10 handle scales I slapped on here, there's a lot to hold on to. It's a very, very long knife. So in the case of a bigger knife where I have more of the handle to hold on to, I got the side traction there. I got a flipper right here, which is jimped, by the way. That's some good jimping on a flipper anyway. In the context of this style knife, I don't really miss it that much. Yeah, I'd rather have it than not have it, but just the sheer design of it, the ergonomics and how long it is, how wide the handle is, I don't really care that much. Now, a knife I do care to have jimping on would be something like this. Smaller, more simple, lighter, even more thin, lower profile. This cold steel end gauge. Although it is jimped, if you will, on the lock bar, the Atlas lock right there, which is very handy. It can really bite my index finger in there to open and close it, just using the locking mechanism itself. This knife, I do actually want some jimping because I don't have as much to hold on to. It's a lot more slim, not much side traction going on the handle scales. I don't have very much. It feels slippery. If I was in a stressful situation, a defensive situation, some kind of emergency situation, I'd prefer this knife to not fly out of my hands or slip out or have my hands slip up and accidentally cut myself and have a disastrous situation get even worse. So I kind of wish I had jimping, just a little something right there on the blade, but they did not put it on there. So in the case of a smaller, lighter, more low profile knife, I actually want jimping. That's when I want it, but it's not on this one. Let's move on to another okay way to do jimping. cutouts in the handle scales, but not in the lock bar that resides parallel to them. Now, it's, again, better than not having it. I do feel the cutouts in there. It's slightly rough. My thumb has somewhat of an obstruction when I'm attempting to slide it up and down the spine. It's certainly less smooth than down here where there is no jimping or cutouts, but because we do not have accommodating cutouts in the lock bar, it doesn't really lock in there. Again, better than not having it, but Cold Steel notoriously does not typically make jimping cutouts in their lock bar as they just do in the handle scales. So your thumb kind of just slides over them. It's okay. Not great. C-, D+ rating on that jimping right there. It looks cool. Maybe aesthetically, that's what they're going for. The lock bar peeks through the cutouts. Maybe it's just aesthetic milling, not a big deal. Before we look at an example of what I consider to be good A+ jimping, let's look at two examples where the manufacturers decided to do something a little bit creative. Schrade SCHA3CB, no jimping on where the thumb ramp is where you'd want it most, I think, but instead they have rubber inserts right here, rubberized inserts. They also have them on the sides, a little bit less slippery than the FRN. It's a rubberized texture. It's kind of sticky. It's not like a sandpapery type grip like you normally see on side traction on FRN or G10, but it's a sticky kind of grip, which I suppose more or less gets the job done. But they did the same thing right up here, parallel to the steel liners right there on the left and the right. You can see on the sides the rubberized material inserts. And again, I suppose it's better than FRN. FRN's slightly more slick, but the fact that it's just not the greatest at this type of job. Rubberized materials don't really lock your thumb in there. If you're doing an entire whole hand grip on a rubberized material, that's different. But for such a small little portion like this, it doesn't really do much at all. Not very successful, but props for creativity. One more. CRKT Foresight, no jimping. Big ol' rounded cutout right there. And the fat of your thumb actually kind of sinks in there. So it's not very grippy, let's just say. It's not like a rough sandpapery type texture that locks your thumb in. Your thumb has a nice little place to nest inside of. That in combination with these big old finger choils and this thumb ramp, I actually do not mind. It actually works okay. And with this style knife, where it's all metal, it's designed to kind of just be a smooth, elegant fondling blade, particularly with that rounded spine right there, I don't mind it. This actually works okay. I don't really need the jimping on this knife. So this knife, I actually don't care whether it has jimping or not. It actually is okay. There is jimping on the flipper, which works very well. Now let's look at an example of good jimping. Or I think this is good jimping anyway. Very simple, just fine, deep little cutouts. They're sharp. They're not rounded, so it's not comfortable. But is jimping supposed to be comfortable? The idea behind jimping, I think anyway, is to keep your thumb from slipping. Really can lock my thumb in there. You can see the skin getting locked in between those cutouts and the steel. My thumb's attempting to free it, but it can't very easily. Very coarse, very sharp. It gets the job done. Spyderco. This one happens to be the Mannix, but pretty much every single Spyderco, as far as I know, has this same pattern on their blades. This one also happens to have it on the bottom of the blade, the Ricasso. And really lock your thumb. It's pretty much just as good as this Boker S2 on the left. A little bit more fine, but more or less they feel the same. If anything, it's a little sharper actually on our Spyderco right here. That's how you do jimping. Do that. If you're a new knife company, if you're a manufacturer of knives, and you're scratching your head, how do I make jimping good? I would just imitate this if you can. Nice, fine, and sharp. It really locks your thumb in there. No complaints from me. A+ on that jimping. If you want jimping, if you want more control over your blade, you don't want it flying out of your hands as easily, that's a good way to do it. A good start, anyway, is good jimping on the blade. Now, that being said, once again, I don't really care that much about jimping in all knives. On some flimsier, smaller, lighter weight knives that are lower profile, you don't have as much to hold on to, we don't have as much side traction or no side traction in some cases, then I may want the jimping so I just get that little extra bit of control. But on a knife that's much bigger, heavier, more massive, that I already have a lot to hold on to, a lot to grip, really hand-filling, really just makes a lot more contact on the skin of my hand. I don't really care as much. What do you think? Are there any advantages or even disadvantages that I left out in this video? Feel free to comment below. Also, feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gun videos. As always, thank you so much for watching. Mannix out.